Good evening. Come in, won't you? What's the matter? Surely you're not nervous. Perhaps it will calm if I tell you a story.
We are meant to call from out of the past stories, strange and weird.
Tales of mystery and terror by radio's masters of the macabre.
Stories of the supernatural, the supernormal, dramatized by fantasy, the mystery, the unknown. We tell you this frankly, so if you wish to avoid the excitement and tension of these imaginary plays, we urge you calmly, sincerely, to turn off your radio now.
This is The Horror. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me this Saturday. This week, we're going to hear from NBC's Short Story with their adaptation of Frankenstein. 52 episodes of this series were produced. It aired from February of 1951 to May of 1952 over NBC stations. The story we're going to hear today was never broadcast by NBC, so it doesn't have an air date, but obviously it was created between 51 and 52. Here's their version of Frankenstein.
NBC presents Short Story. Today, Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley, wife of Percy Shelley, English poet of the period of Romanticism, was herself an author, writing in the convention of the Gothic novel. Along with a group of authors snowed in at a European mountain ski lodge, a storytelling session developed. Mary Shelley's contribution later became her best-known work, Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. Written in 1818, the work has endured to this day as the epitome of horror stories. We'll begin our short story in just a moment. And now, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
The wind howling outside my lonely home is my only companion. All else is quiet here, as I sit by my window in the parlor, writing this document for the scientific world. Be warned, you doctors and scientists who come after me. Be warned that man must not experiment with the secrets of life. My experiences started in the University of Manchester, where I was studying natural history. It was after class, May 22nd, 1818, that Professor Waldman, my close dear friend Henry Clerval, and myself were in the laboratory of the university.
Victor Frankenstein, your persistence amazes me. Someday I shall sit at your feet and allow you to teach me.
Thank you, Professor Waldman. But the whole subject of the structure of man has always been too clouded in mysticism.
Well, frankly, Victor, I prefer mysticism.
That's because you're a mystic, Henry.
Why, Henry's no more a mystic than I am. He just loves to avoid arduous work.
Oh, translating that means I'm lazy, eh, Professor?
Well, if you prefer to put it that way, I rather think of you as a student whose nervous structure does not take kindly to natural history.
The professor's kinder to you than you are to yourself, Henry.
Well, if I worked as hard as you do, Victor, I should probably wear that same gaunt, sleepless look that you carry about.
Well, my experiment will be finished tonight. And then I'll manage the 8 hours sleep that other men manage.
The secret experiment will be finished tonight, huh?
Well, then, will you tell us just exactly what you're doing in the basement at home?
I'll tell the entire world. As a matter of fact, I stayed after class this afternoon, Professor Waldman, to ask you to join me this evening in the basement of our place to watch the completion of my work.
Well, how about me?
I don't think I dare invite more than one, Henry. And the professor is more interested in this type of procedure than you are.
I shall be delighted, Victor.
Just the best friend who never knows what's going on in his own home, that's all.
It's not that, Henry. But I thought you'd entertain Elizabeth for me, while the professor and I were at work.
Entertaining Elizabeth would be a delightful favor, old boy. You know, I think you trust me too much with her. Have you ever met Victor's fiancée, Professor Waldman? She's one of the most charming...
Yes, Elizabeth was one of the most charming, beautiful women I'd ever known. I had been in love with her from childhood, but even my love for Elizabeth couldn't dim my passionate zeal for the work I was doing. It was 8 o'clock that evening. Henry, Elizabeth, and I were seated in the parlor. Elizabeth was saying...
I'll be so glad, Victor, darling, when all this is over. If you only knew how tired you look.
The minute my work is done, successfully or unsuccessfully, I promise you, Elizabeth, we'll be married and off to Switzerland before Henry has time to lock up this place.
But first, we find out about the secret in the basement.
Henry's being eaten up by curiosity.
I don't blame him. I'm suffering pangs of what's it all about, too.
Well, you'll both know soon. I wonder where Professor Waldman is. He's late.
He'll be here soon, Victor. Stop pacing the floor, sweetheart.
I think I'll start my work downstairs. Send the professor down when he arrives, will you, darling?
We'll come down ourselves and take a look around. Or will I turn into a pillar of salt for peeking?
Nobody ever turned into a pillar of salt for peeking, Beth. It was for looking back.
Oh, nothing like a good practical working knowledge of the Bible for scientific experiments. Starts the night off right.
Yes, I thought jokingly of that paragraph from the Bible then. And she was turned into a pillar of salt. But what about a man who looks back? There is no ready reference for him or for me. I went downstairs to my laboratory at a little past 8, opened the door, and started to tinker around to pass the time more quickly. My every sense was alive, taut, waiting, with the sense of what was to come. I heard a knock on the side door, which led me from my laboratory directly into the forest, which bordered Manchester. I looked out and...
Good evening, Victor.
Oh, did Elizabeth tell you to come down this way, Professor?
No, I found the entrance to your laboratory quite by myself.
I help you with your coat, sir?
No. You proceed with your work. Nothing like trivialities to annoy a scientist at work. There we are.
Oh, follow me, Professor, into the back room, and you'll see for yourself what this is all about.
Well, I feel that I'm in for a most exhilarating evening. I wish I had more students fashioned in your mold, Victor.
Well, Professor, here is my...
Why, what's this? A full-sized replica of a man.
Yes, only he isn't full-sized. He's fashioned on a grander scale. I should say this creature standing up would be approximately 8 feet 2 inches tall.
Well, you should have been an artist, Victor. He's a perfect reproduction. What did you make him out of? Wood? Clay?
Animal flesh.
Flesh?
Feel him.
Oh, feels like the body of a dead man.
Or the body of a man who hasn't as yet been brought to life. This body is complete in every detail. Heart, lungs, teeth. Even the fine nervous system.
Oh, it's interesting. Yes, interesting. How about the brain cells?
Yes, adult brain cells. I think he's quite handsome, don't you?
Well, each man to his own taste. He's the best reproduction of a man I've ever seen, but actually his face is hideous. As a plastic surgeon, my dear Victor, I'm afraid I can't give you much credit. Well, what do you intend to do with this Hulk?
You see this fluid here in the test tube?
Yes.
I filled the hypodermic needle with it. And now I'm going to inject the full 8 ounces into the vein, directly above his heart.
But why?
Watch. You see, Professor, quite by accident, I stumbled on the secret of life. I've been bringing small one-cell creatures to life for quite some time.
The secret of life?
Within 30 seconds, after this injection, this creature will live.
You're trying to play God, Victor. It's heresy.
It's science. I'm making a new race, by far finer than the present one. Larger in structure, stronger, heavier, healthier. A race able to live on nuts and berries. With a greater capacity for feeling.
Victor, for the love of heaven, don't go through with this experiment. No man living has the right to tamper with the secret of life. You've created a monster on that floor. You've no idea what will happen if you go through with this.
Watch, Professor. The injection.
I only hope and pray this is a failure.
It can't be. His eyes moved. Watch him, Professor. He's like a baby, first realizing life. His hands touch the floor. His eyes are trying to focus on the world around him.
He's hideous.
Yes, he's hideous. I made the skin too much like parchment, I'm afraid.
Victor, get rid of that monster.
Trying to stand up.
If that mind which you've created is a twisted one, have you any idea what kind of horror you've let loose in England? As a humanitarian, I feel it my Christian duty to do this now.
Put that knife down, Professor.
No, I can't let... Oh, he's got me in the clutch of his hand. Command him to stop this, Victor.
Stop fighting him, Professor. He's frightened. He has the same reactions as a child, grabs and won't let loose.
Let me go, monster.
Stop! Don't go out that door! Put the professor down! Don't go out that door! The monster left my laboratory through the side entrance into the forest, carrying the incredibly mangled body of the professor with him. I rushed out of my laboratory after him, but the creature was faster than I, and he disappeared from view. I returned to my laboratory and destroyed all evidence of the creature's manufacture. I burned the blueprints from which I had made his body. Then, carefully, I locked my laboratory and went upstairs to join Henry Clerval and Elizabeth. I must have looked wild-eyed as I entered the room.
Henry, that's most amusing. You tell the best anecdotes in all of England.
Oh, you flatter me, Elizabeth.
Oh, Victor, you're through sooner than we expected. Darling, what's the matter?
Didn't the professor show up?
Nothing's the matter. My experiment was a failure.
Oh. But the professor...
He never showed up. Beth, Henry, I want to go away.
Of course, darling, we will, as soon as Henry can get the house locked up.
I don't want to wait. I want to leave at once, tonight, please, tonight, Beth. We can get married before we cross the channel and then go to Switzerland.
But it's almost midnight now, darling.
What's the difference? Please, Beth, if you love me.
But why tonight, Victor?
Henry, you've no idea what I've been through. I have to get away at once.
Of course, darling, if you insist. Anything you want.
And we'll be married before daylight. Darling, darling Beth, I know a little minister whom we can awake. And so Beth and I were married that evening in a little chapel on the coast. Then the three of us fled to Bern, Switzerland. I refused to have anything to do with the civilized world. No newspapers, no word of home. Just the peace and quiet of the Swiss mountains. Henry and Elizabeth both tried to learn of the events which had occurred in my laboratory that evening. But I never broke my silence on that subject. After the first tries, they refrained from asking me about it again. It was in the middle of the 4th month of our visit when Henry and I were sitting on the terrace of the little house in the mountain. Beth was out picking berries when Henry suddenly...
Victor, I'm your closest friend. I've tried to keep silent about... Well, Victor, the day after we left England, I bought a newspaper.
Did you, Henry?
Yes, I saw this clipping on the front page. I couldn't very well miss it.
What clipping?
This one. The horribly mangled remains of Professor Waldman was found on Beekman Hill. The identity of the unknown murderer is being sought by Scotland Yard.
Poor Professor Waldman. I'd no idea.
Hadn't you?
No. What are you trying to say to me, Henry?
You're leaving England so suddenly that very night. Your fear of being discovered, the secret experiment. Well, it all seemed to add up to some kind of strange connection with this clipping. Now, if you're in trouble, Victor, you can depend on me. I'll stay by your side.
I'm not in trouble. I'm just tired, terribly tired.
And you know nothing of the professor?
Absolutely nothing.
He didn't come to our chateau that evening.
I told you he didn't then. Stop questioning me.
Victor!
We're out here, Beth.
Oh, I've just had a horrible experience. Oh, darling, I'm so glad to see you.
You're pale, Beth. Sit down right here next to me.
Well, what happened, Beth?
Well, I was walking in the woods not far from here when I looked up and saw... Well, I saw a man. Sort of a man standing over me.
Well, men aren't so bad. That is, if you happen to know the right ones. And you do.
I'm not joshing, Henry. He wasn't exactly a man. He was twice the height of anyone I've ever seen. And his skin looked like dried parchment. It's incredible, but I think I've seen a monster.
Monster?
Yes, I ran away. He didn't follow me. He just stared after me, watching me. You do believe me, don't you?
A monster stared after
Look,
you?
look, Henry. Victor, through the trees right out there. Look! There he is again!
Our story continues after this brief pause. And now, back to today's short story.
Yes, the monster stood there, silhouetted against the trees. The monster which I had created, standing like an evil blot of flesh and bone, moved in the darkening twilight. And then suddenly, phantom-like, it disappeared. Beth and Henry both watched me as I started from the piazza after the disappearing creature in the backwoods. As I drew near to the heavily wooded section, giant footprints in the soft mud about me showed the path ahead. The sun was sinking in the west, and the last orange pinpoints of light needled my flesh until every sense within me was tingling with the expectations of seeing my living horror. Then I realized I was unarmed. Every crooked tree, each twisted branch which obstructed my path, appeared to be his form. I heard the crackling of a branch and the moving of a form on the velvet moss.
I thought you'd come, Creator.
You.
Are you frightened, Creator?
You dare talk to me?
Please, don't turn away from me. Please.
Let me go.
I mean no harm to you. Listen to me, Victor Frankenstein. You must listen to me. You created me. You owe me that much.
I owe you nothing, murderer.
Why am I a murderer? Because you created a form so horrible, a face so distorted, that no man can look upon me and call me friend. I'm an outcast. You can save me.
Let me go.
Not until you hear my story. Sit down, Creator.
My arm! Let me go!
I wandered through the streets of London that first day. Children screamed in the streets. People flocked together trying to kill me. And I was lonely and hungry.
How did you follow me here?
Not so long ago, I returned to my birthplace, the laboratory, broke in and discovered your identity. But first, I fled to Scotland and lived outside of a cottage. That's how I learned to speak. An old blind man was teaching a young French girl to speak English. I listened to the lessons from the open windows.
Now, what do you expect of me?
A companion. A woman of the same species, with my defects. One who will be my friend. This being you must create.
No, I'll not do it.
You must. Every man's entitled to a wife.
No.
You must. If you create her for me, I'll take her with me into the far wastes, and no one will ever see either of us again. Ever.
How will you live?
On fruits and berries. We'll manage together. Please, you can't deny me this.
A maid. A monster's maid.
You will? You will. I swear, I'll never harm another human. Never create her. if you'll only grant me just one companion.
And if I refuse?
If you refuse, even a brain that you have made, Creator, might become twisted and distorted.
And so that night in the forest, I made a devil's bargain. I bargained to create a monster's mate, perhaps another murderer. How could I know? The monster swore to live in the forest and wait a year or 2 years if necessary, and upon completion of my work, he would take his companion away. But if I broke my promise, he swore revenge. And so I started work. I searched Paris for the necessary equipment, built a shack in the woods about a mile away from our chalet. 3 months I worked, 3 solid months, shaping her who was to be his mate. And then, one night, it was windy outside. I thought the wind had blown the door open when...
Victor, I'm sorry I had to disturb you.
Is it Beth?
No, not Beth. She's fine and sends her love. It's the townspeople. Your activities have stirred up a lot of curiosity.
Oh, the fools!
Well, I can't blame them, especially after the rumors which have been going around. Rumors of the... Victor, you know the monster in these forests. You've known of him all along. People have seen him and connect him with you. Mothers in the village are frightened of their children.
I know nothing.
Look, I'm only trying to help you.
I know nothing, I tell you.
But the men have banded together. They're going to make a raid on you here, to burn your laboratory down, and to find the monster who lives in these woods.
They can't. They mustn't.
Oh, what devil's work are you carrying on, man? I'm trying to help you. Oh, Victor, will you please let your friends be your friends?
Henry, go back to Beth and leave me alone.
Beth is safe at home. You're in danger, and I won't leave your side this night, my friend.
Then be prepared.
Prepared for what?
You've guessed many of the reasons for my secrecy.
Then there is a monster.
At school, I stumbled on the secret of life. I was trying to create a superior race. I was a fool, and I created him instead.
And he does live?
Yes, he lives.
Professor Waldman. What happened to Professor Waldman?
The night I created the monster, Waldman became frightened. He screamed, attempted to kill the creature. The creature, like a child, warded him off and then tore him to pieces in front of me. I couldn't stop him. The monster had killed before it had really begun to live.
Then what?
The monster left the basement through the side entrance, carrying the professor's corpse. I had no choice. I had to leave the country.
Oh, what are you doing with that creature now?
Fulfilling a promise. Follow me into my cabin and I'll show you. How soon do you think the townsfolk will be here?
Oh, within 2 hours or so. They're meeting in the square in town.
Come in.
What? A woman?
Yes, a woman. The monster's mate, his friend. I promised him a friend, and in return he swears to hide himself forever from the world.
A devil's bargain, Victor.
A bargain I must keep for all our sakes.
But the monster proved himself a murderer time and time again. Why, in London after the death of Professor Waldman.
Time and time again.
But how do you know that the mate won't be even more vicious than he? You'll let loose an avalanche of hatred. Oh, destroy her before you bring her to life.
Yes, avalanche of hatred.
Look, you've no time to waste. Set fire to this cabin quickly, Victor. Set fire to the cabin and come away. Why, man alive, you can't go through with this thing.
But the promise.
It's a promise to a fiend. He'll be your death and ours, Victor. Oh, hurry, man, hurry, if you've any love for Beth.
I've been insane with grief and fear for Beth and you. Go back to Beth, Henry, at once and wait for me.
And you?
I'll set fire to the cabin as soon as I destroy my books. I'll join you later.
Well, hurry, friend. We'll meet you home as soon as you can make it.
For 1 full hour, I worked feverishly. I soaked the shack in oil, and then taking a taper from the vase, I lit the fire. The fire started quickly. I placed my books in the very center of the room, and then opened the door of my shack. The experiment was at an end, and I felt free. The monster's mate would never live. I walked out, and then I saw him, his face contorted with rage.
Ah! My wife! My only dead devil friend! Ah! My only dead!
I knew then what was in his mind as he raced through the forest in front of me. The blazing shack was a beacon of light. and I saw his huge, misshapen form outdistance me, far outdistance me. He was faster than I, taller than I, and covered more territory. Racing, running blindly through the forest, I reached my home. The door of my home was flung open. Henry, mutilated and torn, stumbled blindly toward me.
Victor, the monster.
Henry, what?
I tried to, Victor.
Henry, you.
Beth, no. Upstairs.
Beth, I'm coming, darling, I'm coming. I'm coming upstairs. I'm coming, darling, I'm coming. If you kill her, Beth! Beth, oh, my darling. My darling. Oh, Beth, no. No. Both you and Henry. Both dead.
You two are alone, Creator.
Yes. Both of them were dead. All my dear ones gone from me now. And I'm alone. The wind howling outside my window is my only companion. All else is quiet as I sit by my window, writing this document. I am dying of loneliness and fear, shunned by the world, hated by everyone. I know I am waiting only for the monster's return, and he, having eluded the world, will return when I've suffered my full share of misery, as he has suffered his.
This has been NBC Short Story. Today, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Join us again next time when NBC presents Short Story.
That's it for this episode of The Horror. You can find more from NBC's Short Story, past episodes of this show, thousands of other old-time radio episodes, and everything else, Relic Radio, at the website, relicradio.com. If you'd like to help support this and all of the shows, you can do so through the website as well. Your support makes all of this possible. Thanks to those who have helped out. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be back next Saturday with another episode of The Horror.
Strange Tales.
RelicRadio.com presents tales of the strange and bizarre, the weird and the wicked. Stories not necessarily of the supernatural, but of the unnatural. Join us now for Strange Tales, featuring radio drama at its most mysterious and unusual. Strange Tales. Thanks for joining me once again. We'll hear from The Creaking Door this week, a South African series that aired over Springbok Radio Debuted in the 1960s, most of the surviving episodes come from 1964 to 1965, the State Express Cigarettes sponsored run. Our story today is Don't Take My Blood, first heard January 5th, 1965.
Flown. I have sailed. I have moved about this world of ours, and ever in search of the finest of its kind, we bring you the tops in spine chillers. The Creaking Door. The manufacturers of State Express 3-5 Stilton King cigarettes take pleasure in presenting The Creaking Door. Good evening, friends of the Creaking Door. The Creaking Door is opening. So do come in. Do you subscribe to the view that some of us have power over the life and death of someone else? John does. He knows when people are going to die, and that can be most upsetting for all concerned. Move in world class. Get the taste of new smooth State Express 3-5s today. We promise you, it's the smoothest cigarette you can get. It's a blend that has been perfected after years of constant research by our master blenders, and the recent development of an entirely new process which gives you an even smoother 3-5 smoke. We promise you, it's the smoothest cigarette you can get. Move in world class. Get the taste of new, smooth State Express 3-5s today. John is not a usual sort of man, although he has a very ordinary sort of name. John Smith. What could be more ordinary than that? But he is a most unusual man, really. Take his blood group, for instance. His blood group is Group AB. Very rare indeed, as the doctor is pointing out to him.
Only 2% of people belong to Group AB, Mr. Smith.
I know my group is very rare.
And this young girl is dying. She must have a transfusion as soon as possible, otherwise she will die. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
But surely I'm not the only person with this type of blood in the area?
No doubt there are other people, but we don't know everyone's blood group offhand, just like that. We depend, as you know, on blood donors. You're the only registered donor in this area.
But there must be someone else.
Believe me, Mr. Smith, there isn't. Anyway, giving a transfusion isn't anything to worry about. There's nothing to it.
I've given blood before, I know that.
Then you'll help us? You'll help the young girl?
I can't. I can't go through that again. I won't. You've no right to ask me.
Please, Mr. Smith, calm down. What I'm asking isn't so terrible.
Yes, it is.
But you said yourself...
You don't know what you're asking. I can't do it.
Mr. Smith, unless young Beryl Rogers receives a transfusion of blood, type AB blood, she will most certainly die.
But there must be somebody else who can do it. Why pick on me?
I've told you why, Mr. Smith. You're the only registered donor in the area.
Well, then what about outside the area? What about blood banks? You keep supplies of blood under refrigeration these days, don't you?
Our own local supplies of AB blood from the blood bank are exhausted. To find supplies elsewhere and fly them here would take too long. The girl would die. Oh, hang it all, man. All I'm asking you to do is give a pint of your blood. That's all. Not your life.
No. That's not what you're asking. And you don't know what you're asking. I can't do it. I can't.
Very well. And then there's nothing more I can do. I can't force you, I'm afraid. There is, unfortunately, no law which says that one must give blood. But I hope, Mr. Smith, that you'll be able to live with your conscience after tonight. After this young girl dies because you won't help. And I hope you can face yourself in the mirror each day.
It wouldn't be saving her. Don't you understand? It wouldn't. It would be only postponing something which might as well be ended now. This girl's life is already ended. Unless you can find someone else to help.
You're the only one, Mr. Smith. I've told you before. You're the only one, her only chance.
Then if I'm her only chance, she hasn't got one.
You refuse to help her?
Yes.
Mr. Smith, this is a free country. You have every right to say that. You must have a very good reason for letting a young girl go to an untimely death like this.
I have.
Won't you tell me what it is?
You wouldn't believe me. Nobody believes me.
I promise. I listen with an open mind. You see, the girl's father is waiting outside to hear your decision. I'll have to tell him something.
All right. I'll tell you. I'll tell you what's been making my life a nightmare for the last 3 years. I first registered as a blood donor about 3.5 years ago. As you said, my group is the rarest. There aren't many donors. But also, there aren't so many people needing transfusions. So it was about 5 months before I was called on to help. He was a young man. Derek Evans. I still remember his name. He'd been badly cut up in a motor accident. They phoned me from this hospital at about 2 a.m. I came along here and gave 2 pints of blood. It saved young Derek's life. At least that's what we all thought. But it didn't save his life, really. It only saved him a far more horrible death. 2 or 3 days after I'd given the blood, I came along to the hospital to see how he was getting on. By this time, he was sitting up in bed looking quite well again. I was interested to see the man whose life had been saved by my blood, I suppose. But also, I felt I had to see him. You see, Doctor, my blood was flowing in his veins. Already I felt a strange sort of kinship with him. I sat on the chair beside his bed and smiled at him. Well, how are you feeling?
Oh, fine. It's funny to think about it, isn't it?
What?
Well, that your blood is now flowing around my body, through my brain, and making me think and breathe.
Yes, it is.
Although I must confess, I don't feel any different.
Come on, darling. Jill, come on. This part's quite solid, but now she's well over to the west. Wait. Help! I'm sinking. No, don't come any nearer. Throw me a rope. Help! Jill, help! I'm in the quicksand. I'm sinking. Help!
Mr. Smith, are you all right?
What? Oh, good heavens. How terrible.
Oh, what is it? What's the matter? You've gone quite pale.
No, it's nothing. I'll be all right. But there was something, and I didn't dare tell him. As he'd been speaking, suddenly into my mind's eye, there flashed a picture that had been frighteningly real. It wasn't as if I had imagined myself somewhere else or anything like that. I'd been completely aware that I was sitting in the hospital ward.
But in the front of my consciousness, it flashed a picture of young Derek Evans and a girl walking beside him. He'd suddenly stepped into a quicksand, and as I watched, horrified, I'd seen him sucked down into the morass. I didn't tell him what I'd imagined. It's not the sort of thing you'd tell a convalescent patient. But as soon as I could, I made my excuses and left. I tried to put the remembrance of it from my mind, but that night I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I made a phone call to Derek's parents.
Hello?
Mrs. Evans?
Speaking. Who's this?
My name isn't important. I wonder if you can tell me, has your son Derek got a girlfriend?
My son's engaged to be married. Who is it?
Please, this is very important. Could you tell me what his fiancée's name is?
Well, really,
Please, it's very important.
Well, I don't know what business it can possibly be of yours, but her name is Jill.
I'd somehow known, somewhere in the dark recesses of my mind, that was the name she was going to say. Jill. The name which I'd heard Derek call out in my vision. I was stunned. For a long time, I walked about like a man in a daze. Was it possible that the fact that my blood was flowing in his veins had somehow given me the ability to see into Derek's future? It seemed too unbelievable to contemplate. Finally, I decided to return to the hospital and tell him the whole story. It might well be nothing but nonsense, but at least he should be warned, I thought. I phoned to check when I'd be allowed to see him.
What name was that again?
Evans, Derek Evans. He was in a motor accident.
Oh, that, Mr. Evans. I'm afraid it will be no use coming to see him, sir.
Why not?
He was discharged from hospital 2 days ago.
I phoned his home, of course. But his mother told me that he'd gone away for a week or so into the country to convalesce. She must have been a little suspicious of me making odd phone calls by this time, because she refused to tell me if I could get in touch with him. But looking back, it wouldn't have been any good anyway. At the time, I told myself that I was behaving hysterically over nothing, and tried to put the whole thing from my mind. I succeeded, too, up to a point, until a couple of days later, I bought the evening paper as usual. And there it was, staring me in the face. A young man, Derek Evans, was drowned today in a quicksand, not far from the village of Medside. His fiancée, Miss Jill Worthing, who was with him, escaped unharmed. So now you see, Doctor, why I'm not going to give this young girl any of my blood. My blood is evil. It brings about death in the most horrible fashion. And worse than that, I know about it in advance.
Move in world class. Get the taste of new smooth State Express 3.5s today. We promise you, it's the smoothest cigarette you can get. It's a blend that has been perfected after years of constant research by our master blenders, and the recent development of an entirely new process which gives you an even smoother 3.5 smoke. We promise you, it's the smoothest cigarette you can get. Move in world class. Get the taste of new, smooth State Express 3.5s today.
Dear, poor John. Count Dracula down here is getting quite restless. He wants John to look into his future.
by giving him some of his blood. The good old-fashioned way.
Then you're quite adamant.
Oh, for heaven's sake, why can't you leave me alone? You don't seem to understand what you're asking. I've told you it's happened 4 times in the past, and each time I've lived under a terrible shadow of doom until the person concerned has died.
But look, if you believe what you say to be true, then one can take precautions. Take Derek Evans, for instance. He could have been prevented from going away into the country. The tragedy could have been avoided.
I said that with Rose Warwick. But at least in her case, I was sure that my vision couldn't possibly come true.
What happened?
Rose was a cripple. I gave her blood, saved her life. Then I saw her quite clearly in my mind's eye. She was screaming for help, and there was ice all round her and ice skating. The more I thought about it, the more impossible it was. She couldn't even walk, let alone skate. At last, I thought this sequence was going to be broken. I should be free.
And what happened?
She was in a crowded cinema when it caught fire. She died, burnt to death. And the film that was showing was called Winter Wonderland. All about ice skating. Well, what?
Are you going to save my daughter's life, or are you going to let her die?
I can't do it, Mr. Rogers. Maybe your daughter Bella will live without my assistance.
That's quite impossible. And we only have about 15 minutes left at the outside.
I can't do it.
You're a monster, that's what you are. A monster. Now listen to me, Mr. Smith. I promise you one thing. If you don't help my little girl and she dies, I'll kill you.
All right. All right, what's the use? You don't want to understand, either of you. I'll do it.
Good.
But I'm warning you. I won't be saving your daughter's life, Mr. Rogers. I'll just be keeping her alive so that she can die in a much more horrible fashion.
How's her respiration?
Normal, Doctor.
And the donor?
I'm fine. Don't worry about me.
She's already getting some color in her cheeks. All right, nurse, remove the needle.
Very well, Doctor.
Mr. Smith, I can't thank you enough. 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 Enough.
Please, leave me alone. Don't. I didn't mean. Don't kill me. Take your hand. Please.
No.
Mr. Smith, what is it?
It's never happened as quickly as this before.
What's the matter?
As the nurse was removing the needle from her arm, I saw it.
What did you see?
The man was standing with his back to me. I couldn't see his face, but hers. It was terrible. Poor girl.
What? What did you see?
This man had his hands round her throat, and he was strangling her. I haven't saved this poor girl, Doctor. She's going to be murdered. Well, how are you feeling?
I'm fine. Who are you?
Oh, I helped you when you were very sick.
Oh, you're the man who gave me some blood, aren't you?
That's right.
It's funny to think about it, isn't it? Your blood being pumped about inside me. It must be nice blood because I'm feeling much better.
I'm glad. How old are you, Beryl?
16, nearly 17.
When are you leaving hospital?
About a week, the doctor said.
You will be careful, won't you? You're such a pretty girl.
Careful? Oh, what do you mean?
Nothing. Nothing, just be careful. I pray that it doesn't come true this time.
Going to ask me in?
Oh, of course. Come in.
How are you?
I'm very, very well. Now, come in here. There's a fire.
Thank you.
Now, sit down. Tell me what you've been doing with yourself the last 4 months.
You You were very nice to me while I was in hospital.
Oh, nonsense. It's just...
You told me that if ever I was in trouble, if ever I needed any help...
Of course, there's nothing wrong, is there?
Well, you met my father, didn't you?
Yes, I did. How is he?
He's dead. He died last month.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know what to do. That's why I came to you. You see, I'm not quite 17 yet. Unless I have a respectable place to stay, well, they're going to put me in a home.
That would be awful.
That's why I came to you. You said if ever I've got a job, I could pay for my keep. It wouldn't cost you anything. I haven't got any relatives or friends. My mother's been dead for years. I tried to work out what I should do. You're the only person I could think of. Please, won't you help me?
No. Now, don't cry. Of course I'll help you. I've been thinking about you quite a lot these last 3 or 4 months. Keep an eye on you. Maybe this time I can make sure that vision didn't come true. She moved in. I had a big house and there was plenty of room. I've never married, never had a family. And it was wonderful at first. Just having someone to care about and someone who cared about me. Oh, there was nothing else in it but that. I know what people have been saying, but that was nonsense. She was like a daughter to me, the daughter I'd never had. Then she brought Mike home. From the start, I didn't trust him. He was too cocky, too confident. And he was evil.
Uncle John, this is Mike.
Oh, pleased to meet you, I'm sure. How do you do?
We're going out for a drive.
Yes, of course. Well, don't be too late back, will you?
Oh, don't worry, Mr. Smith. I'll bring her back safe and sound.
Hello, I think it's time you went to bed. 3 in the morning. Who's down there with you?
It's only Mike. He's showing me the new dance step.
Well, I think it's time you went home. You must get some sleep. You'll never get up to work in the morning.
Come on, just another little kiss.
I ought to go in. He'll be waiting up for me like as not.
What do you worry about him for? He's not your father.
He's been very good to me.
Well, I've been good to you, haven't I?
Mike.
Listen, why don't you and me go away for a few days, eh?
Go away? What do you mean?
Oh, nothing wrong, but we can have a ball, just you and me. Get away from this guy Smith telling you what to do all the time, what time to come in, who to go out with. What about it?
She's not going anywhere with you. Now, come on in, Bill. Get to bed. You're not to see this man again.
Now, wait a minute.
You heard me, Bill. Now, come in.
I'd better go, Mike. Good night.
Well, I'll see you tomorrow.
Oh, no, you won't. I'll see that you have nothing more to do with her. Now then, what's the meaning of this? What was he talking about? Going away together? Oh, I heard you.
You've got no right to listen in on my conversation.
No, haven't I?
No, you haven't. You're not my father, or my husband, or my boyfriend.
While you stay in my house under my roof, you try and behave like a respectable person.
In that case, it's time I left.
What are you talking about?
I'd pack my bags and go. Mike will look after me.
I should have let her go. She wasn't really my responsibility. But a nagging voice inside said that if I allowed her to leave, this Mike was going to strangle her. It had always been true before. I had to make sure it didn't come true this time. I had to. I raced up the stairs after her and threw open the door of her room. She had an open suitcase on the bed and was throwing clothes into it. What are you doing?
You can see what I'm doing. Now leave me alone.
You're not leaving.
Yes, I am. And you can't stop me.
I can't I? I'll see you do as I tell you, you little tramp. I'll see that you don't get murdered. I'll save you in spite of yourself.
Leave me alone. Stop touching me. Please. You murderer.
by the throat. I don't remember any more until she was lying at my feet. She was dead. My vision had come true again. She'd been murdered just as I'd seen. And now I knew why the figure whose back I'd seen had been vaguely familiar. It had been me that I'd seen commit murder.
All right, Sergeant. Take him away. I only hope the judge believes your story, Smith, because I don't.
Policemen can be very suspicious at times, can't they? Anyway, don't worry too much. We'll make John Smith very cozy down here. I'm sure he'll find that he has a few blood brothers, in fact.
In world class. Get the taste of new smooth State Express 3.5s today. We promise you, it's the smoothest cigarette you can get. It's a blend that has been perfected after years of constant research by our master blenders, and the recent development of an entirely new process which gives you an even smoother 3.5 smoke. We promise you, it's the smoothest cigarette you can get. Move in world class. Get the taste of new, smooth State Express 3.5s today.
This is your host back again. Just a reminder of our rendezvous next week. Where are we going? Through the creaking door? Of course.
The manufacturers of State Express 3.5 Filter King cigarettes invite you to listen next Saturday at 9 o'clock when they will again present The Creaking Door.
That's our strange tale for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Find more from The Creaking Door at relicradio.com alongside thousands of other old-time radio episodes, all the other podcasts from Strange Tales, everything else Relic Radio. It's all at the website. You donate through the website as well if you'd like to help support this and all of the shows. Your support keeps this show coming every week. To those who have helped out, thanks for joining me today. Back next Sunday with another episode of Relic Radio's Strange Tales.